This is Robert Capuccio. Welcome to the Self Help Antidote, a weekly dose of reason, perspective, and insight, where we challenge conventional thinking and explore authentic strategies and insights around personal transformation. Our commitment to you is to bring you some of the world's leading experts in the domains of fitness, wellness, coaching, and behavior change, separating fact from fallacy. Okay, so for this episode, I wanted to try something a little bit different. It recently occurred to me, it probably should have occurred to me earlier, but anyway, it recently occurred to me that I'm out doing a lot of speaking, consulting, and I'm having a lot of conversations with people whose work cross multiple industries. And there's a lot of questions that come up within these conversations and presentations. And a few of them come up rather often. I thought, you know what? Why don't I start sharing some of this information on the podcast? So today I want to talk about emotional intelligence, because there are 6 questions that I've been asked. I mean, there are a lot more than 6 questions, but 6 questions I want to address on this particular episode around emotional intelligence and why it's important, why it can enhance our performance in our career, as well as our daily lives with the people that matter most to us. So emotional intelligence enhances our personal relationships as well as career dynamic or professional effectiveness, if you will, because it improves our ability to understand and manage our own emotions. And that allows us to empathize with others, communicate effectively, and resolve conflicts in our personal lives and in the workplace. This leads to stronger connections, better teamwork, and a more adaptive and resilient response to everyday challenges, which fosters, on the other hand, collaboration because it builds trust and cooperation, again, in both personal and professional settings. So the term psychological safety was coined by an organizational behavioral scientist named Amy Edmondson. And she introduced the concept in her 1999 paper titled Psychological Safety and Learning Behavior in Work Teams, where she explored how team members' perceptions of the level of safety and interpersonal risk-taking within a team influences learning and performance. Her work is brilliant, and I would highly recommend it for a deeper dive into why psychological safety, one of the key elements being emotional intelligence, is critical. It's critical for your career. If you lead a team, if you work within a team, her work is going to be extremely insightful for you. So let's jump into the questions. The first question, this is kind of interesting. How does emotional intelligence support my level of motivation personally? Because I would love to be more emotionally intelligent, but I'm struggling. Wow, I really feel that. Have you heard that? Sometimes we hear that more often from people who share our surnames and they live in the same household. But if we go outside the household to the workplace, to a social environment, or maybe even have a conversation with the person we see in the mirror, we seem to be hearing that more and more, aren't we? So let's answer this. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, if you will, can be a valuable asset when you're struggling with personal motivation. So what we do in the way we engage with others is what we do for ourselves. Emotional intelligence requires understanding, managing, and effectively utilizing our own emotions and those of others. So back in 2010, there was a study conducted by Travis Bradbury and Gene Graves that found that the higher the emotional intelligence, the greater the personal and professional success. And this was in many aspects of personal and professional success, including motivation. So let's take a look at a couple of ways to unpack this. I'm going to answer this in 5 parts. Number 1 is self-awareness. Recognizing your own emotional state can help you understand the underlying reasons why you might lack motivation in a given set of circumstances. And this becomes, therefore, like the first step in addressing the issue. Number 2, self-regulation. When you're aware of your emotions, you can better manage them. I know I've talked about this on this show, affective labeling, that the more specific and clear you can get around exactly what it is you're feeling. I think this is specifically referring to emotions that do not feel necessarily good or they're challenging in the moment. The less intensity you're going to feel with that emotion. And the more you start to identify what basic human needs that you have that might be going unmet. In early episodes, we talked a lot about this. So if you're feeling anxious, techniques like deep breathing, in addition to affective labeling, can help you regain focus and control. Third reason is empathy. Understanding the emotional needs and responses of others can also benefit your own motivation. For example, if you're part of a team, sensing the group's emotional climate can also help you adapt your own motivational strategies. Social skills are the fourth thing that I want to unpack. Emotional intelligence can help you seek and provide social support, which numerous studies, such as those conducted by Julian Holt-Lundstad, I hope I'm not butchering that name, also back in 2010, have found that things like emotional intelligence are critical for well-being and our own level of motivation. And finally, the fifth thing that I want to unpack here is intrinsic motivation. One component of emotional intelligence is being driven by internal rewards like personal growth, a sense of achievement, our level of connection, and how we build something with other people, rather than external factors like money or status. Not necessarily saying that if you're driven by money because you have a financial need to, or you're excited about an upcoming promotion, you shouldn't be. But what we are saying is that intrinsic motivation, according to the research by people like DC and Ryan in their self-determination theory, it points out that intrinsic motivation tends to be far more sustainable than external motivation. So in times of struggle, leveraging your emotional intelligence can provide you with key insights and tools to improve your motivation, helping you navigate through challenges more effectively. Another question is, well, there's a bit of skepticism in this, understandably so. If emotional intelligence is so impactful to an organization and its people, why does it seem like so many organizations are reluctant to shift to a culture that focuses on emotional intelligence, or they seem to face significant challenges in doing so? Yeah, that's an astute observation. Shifting to a culture that prioritizes emotional intelligence can be challenging, and this is for several reasons. One of the biggest obstacles is often organizational inertia. What I mean by that is there are existing norms and practices within an organization, sometimes the core values and the culture itself, that resists change. People might be used to doing things a certain way, and they view things like emotional intelligence as a quote unquote soft skill that's secondary to technical expertise or hard metrics. Now, the more data that comes out, the less weight those perspectives hold, but they're present nonetheless. And here's another one. The prisoner's dilemma. Let me explain what I mean by the prisoner's dilemma, and then I'll explain why this is relevant in what challenges stand in the way of creating an environment within an organization or even within a household that in some cases that is more emotionally intelligent, if you will. The prisoner's dilemma is a fundamental problem in game theory that demonstrates why two otherwise rational individuals may not cooperate, even if it appears on the surface that it's completely in their best interest to do so. So, in the prisoner's dilemma, let's say there are two individuals, we'll call them prisoners, and they're arrested and interrogated separately. Each prisoner has two options: to cooperate with the other by remaining silent, or to defect by betraying one another. Now, the outcomes depend on the decisions made by both prisoners. So one, if the prisoners cooperate, in other words, they're being interrogated by the police, but they choose to remain silent, they each can receive a moderate sentence or even a minimum one. Let's say for the case of this argument, 1 year in prison. Now, Two, in the second scenario, if one prisoner defects, meaning they betray the other one, but the other one cooperates, the betrayer goes free and the cooperator receives a severe sentence, let's say 5 years in prison. However, in the third scenario, if both prisoners defect, they both betray one another, they each receive a significant sentence, but not as severe as if only one had cooperated. So let's say in this scenario, they would each receive 3 years in prison. Here's an example. So Alice and Bob are caught committing a minor crime. The police separate them and offer them the following deal. If Alice and Bob both stay silent, they're each going to get 1 year in prison, right? That's if they do not cooperate, they align with one another. However, if Alice betrays Bob, but Bob stays silent and stays loyal to Alice, Alice goes free. But Bob, in exchange for his loyalty to Alice, well, he gets 3 years in prison. Now, if Bob betrays Alice, but Alice stays silent and therefore remains loyal to Bob, Bob goes free, but Alice gets 3 years in prison. Now, if they both betray each other, let's say they'll each get 2 years in prison. So what's the point of this, and how does this relate to emotional intelligence within an organization? And the answer is that despite the best overall outcome being for both to stay silent, in other words, being loyal to each other, working with each other, the rational choice for each, fearing betrayal, is to betray each other. And this means that both of them get 2 years in prison. And this perfectly illustrates the conflict between individual and sometimes let's just say individual rationality and collective benefit. A lot of times when you're dealing with suspicion, caution, or in some cases, even cynicism around what happens if I completely jump into this, or as a department head, I lead my employees down the path of emotional intelligence, but leadership at the top of the organization is not aligned and isn't making the same commitment as everybody else in the organization. Well, I step out and I'm going to feel like an idiot because ultimately I know that if leadership is not committed, this initiative is going to fail. So this is by no means an exhaustive list of challenges, but there are 5 common challenges that get in the way of organizations' attempts at cultivating a more emotionally intelligent environment. And the first one is, as we just talked about, skepticism or outright cynicism. Traditional business culture often prioritizes quantifiable metrics, and this makes it challenging to convince stakeholders around the importance of something as seemingly intangible as emotional intelligence. So if I go out and I fully commit to this because I believe in it. I believe in it because of who I am as a person. I believe in it based on the research I've read, but it doesn't work out. Well, I could be positioned as someone who's supportive of quote unquote soft skills. And I'm afraid that might actually hurt my career or my standing with my colleagues, my team, so on and so forth. So here's a second reason why organizations struggle to implement something like emotional intelligence, and that is training and development. Developing emotional intelligence isn't as straightforward as learning a technical skill. As a matter of fact, it often requires ongoing coaching and practice. And this could be not only labor intensive, because it's hard to do, but it could also be resource intensive. It requires an authentic care and connection to others. And in this case, intention is more powerful than technique. So in order for this to work from a training and development perspective, it has to be truly rooted in the organization's core values and not just a check in a box on a long list of things that the organization hopes it'll eventually work on. Number 3, assessment. Measuring emotional intelligence is a bit more complex than assessing more quantifiable skills. And this makes it hard to track the progress or effectiveness of it within an organization. And it also means it takes time to notice what emerges on a cultural level. And a lot of times organizations are very impatient. They want to see results this month and at the very least this quarter. Number 4, leadership. And I mentioned this earlier. If senior leaders do not model emotional intelligence, employees are less likely to take it seriously. And that's if they even buy into it at all, because leadership buy-in is critical for a cultural shift. Now, the buy-in that from the bottom up, from the workforce, is critically important as well. But if we don't have top-down support, things rarely, if ever at all, make it more than just a couple of months within an organization. And the 5th thing is generational and cultural differences. Diverse workforces might have different perceptions and applications of emotional intelligence, making a one-size-fit-all approach ineffective. So when I first moved out to the United Kingdom, there was a lot of alignment with the sense of humor and emotional intelligence and how people went ahead bonding with one another in the workplace, because it matched a lot of the type of cultural similarities that I was exposed to in Brooklyn, New York. Yet in a country like Singapore, it's completely different. And what really works in one culture can be disastrous in another. So if you have an organization that operates on a national level where in different parts of the country, the culture is different, or on a multinational level where even more so, that could present challenges. So when you start to effectively transition to an emotionally intelligent focused culture, it's essential to address these challenges head on. And this can be done through education, training, and ongoing support from leadership. But it can also be done through exercising emotional intelligence and having empathy and asking sincere questions and being curious about other people and listening, especially when other people's views, perspectives, and preferences do not align with your own, and asking the question, okay, great. Well, if I were them, why would I feel this way? Why would I view the world this way? And empathetically working towards one another to respect everybody's cultural differences. Question number 3, how can you, in developing emotional intelligence, develop empathy towards others? Is developing empathy towards others even possible? And well, the answer to this is yes. If you really want to, it is. Developing empathy involves intentional practice and a willingness to understand the feelings and perspectives of others. And here are some ways to cultivate empathy. Number 1, active listening. Give your people full attention during conversations. And by your people, even if you don't lead a department or lead an organization, the people that you collaborate with, that you have shared vested interests with, your friends, people in your social circle, your family, well, those are your people. And so you want to give them full attention when you're engaged in a dialogue with them. Listen without interrupting. And rather than thinking about what you want to say next, or does this align with my perspective, try to understand the emotions behind their words. What is this person feeling? Or what do I perceive they're feeling as they're explaining their point of view, their perspective? Number 2, ask open-ended questions, not only open-ended questions, but ask more open-ended questions. Encourage other people to share more about their experience of the world and their feelings by asking questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no. 3, put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel in their situation? I know I went over this. This cannot be understated, or I think overstated, actually. And this mental exercise helps you understand what others are going through. Remember, understanding is not necessarily condoning, or it's not reflective of you not holding on to your own values and your perspectives. It's simply suspending them in the moment so they don't interfere with you allowing yourself to project yourself into another person's thoughts, emotions, and feelings within their given situation. Number 4, observe nonverbal cues. Pay attention to people's body language, their facial expressions, and their tone of voice to gain a deeper understanding of what's going on in their mind and their heart, not simply what they're saying. 5, be non-judgmental. Try to understand other people's feelings and perspectives without having to label, is the way they feel right or is it wrong? Number 6, read widely. Be a voracious consumer of information. Literature and storytelling can offer insights into the human condition and expose you to perspectives different than your own. I've heard people say from the stage, only read trade publications that deal with the expertise within your given arena. Yeah, well, that means nothing, because without collaboration, the things that we can accomplish on our own is greatly limited. So no matter how much technical expertise that you happen to have within your area, it doesn't matter unless you can communicate that in a way that is, one, understandable, two, galvanizing, even inspiring, and actionable through collaboration. So when you read about other people's biographies, when you read fiction, which a lot of people tell you, don't waste time reading fiction. Fiction is amazing because it gets past our mental gatekeepers and biases and the things that blocks us from learning and development. It can expand our perspective, and we can vicariously interject ourselves into the story and narratives of these characters. And we can kind of through vicariously living through them, test our ability to empathize in low stakes situations, and then practice that out in the real world where it really matters because the stakes are a lot higher. 7, practice compassion. When you understand someone's feelings, take it a step further by showing kindness and offering assistance to them if it's appropriate. So empathy is imaginatively projecting ourselves into the thoughts, feelings, and situations of other people. Compassion is when we are compelled to do something about it, to alleviate suffering or to elevate someone or to give them assistance that allows a greater outcome for them, and very often ourselves, than they could generate for themselves. Number 8, reflect on your own experiences. So consider times when you faced hardships and you needed empathy from others. And this can make it easier to extend empathy to yourself. One of the things I've also talked about on this show, I believe with the great Tiffany Cook, is around fundamental attribution errors, where we give ourselves grace when we notice that we're acting out of alignment with our commitments. We say we want health and vitality, but what we do is ice cream. And it's like, I was out and, everybody was ordering ice cream and I just felt like I didn't want to be rude. And, the situation was outside of my control. Normally I wouldn't do that. But when you witness another person out to dinner and they say, I'm working on, kind of getting fit. And then they go ahead and they eat dessert. You're like, yeah, well, they lack discipline. They lack willpower. They want the outcome, but they also want the comfort. They don't want to work for it. You give them no such grace. As a matter of fact, you attribute that falsely, hence fundamental attribution error, to an internal attribute that they lack, but you yourself possess it. And a lot of times, if we consider that and we reflect on our own experiences, when we're in situations like this, we often desire empathy. So it's okay to desire empathy, but also be the person that gives it. Seek feedback. Number 9, ask for input from trusted colleagues, family members, friends on how empathetic you are and how you can improve. Very often we don't see ourselves with as high a level of objectivity as we would assume. So we might say that, we're so empathetic to other people. But when we ask them, they might be like, well, sometimes. And 10, emotional self-regulation. Be aware and manage your own emotions. And in doing that can make it easier to focus on others. And this facilitates more empathetic interactions more of the time. So regularly practicing these strategies, I know I just gave you 10 short responses, but it can help you develop empathetic skills over time. Question number 4. How do I increase my emotional intelligence through practice? This is great. I think it builds on the last question, to be fair. Increasing emotional intelligence is, again, definitely possible through consistent practice and self-awareness. There's not like a one-size-fits-all guidebook, but there are well-regarded resources on the topic, such as Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, or Travis Bradbury and Gene Graves' book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And these books offer exercises and assessments that help you understand and improve your own level of emotional intelligence. So here's a simplified practice to help you get started. One could be daily awareness, and that could take the form of daily reflection, spending a few minutes each day on connecting with your emotions and your behavior. So how am I feeling right now? And my friend Craig Harper loves to use this example, and I think it's brilliant. What do I believe is the experience of me? If I were somebody else, would I enjoy hanging out with me? Would I enjoy working with me? Would I enjoy whatever area of importance with someone just like me? Journaling works. Write down situations that triggered strong emotional responses and analyze, why did that happen? Not just what was my emotional response, but what was it about that particular situation that triggered it? That could be highly valuable. So another thing other than daily reflection could be self-regulation. Pause and breathe when possible. So before reacting in a heated moment, take a deep breath and count. I don't want to say count to 10, but maybe count to 5 or 6 on the inhale. Hold and exhale for a slow 10 seconds. And in situations where you cannot take a long breath, take a 5-second pause. One, that creates a power dynamic where you are pausing and not giving into the temptation to respond straight away because you feel that what somebody said or did demands an immediate response, or you feel so emotionally compelled to respond straight away because of what you're feeling internally. Just sit back and create a 3 to 5 second pause between stimulus and response. And that is also a way to gather your thoughts, gather your responses, and draw attention in the room to you. So whether you are public speaking or whether you're in a conversation or a meeting, when you feel flustered and you're just so emotionally triggered that you want to respond, take 3 to 5 seconds. It really works. On that, identify triggers. So make a list of situations and behaviors that typically trigger negative emotions in you. And then the second step could be, what are effective coping strategies that allow you to mitigate the intensity of your response and maybe respond in ways that don't cultivate collaboration or high levels of emotional intelligence, and see when you can practice that. If possible, in lower stakes situations. Motivation is another one. Set achievable goals. Start with small, specific goals and work your way up to larger objectives in taking your behavior from where it is now to where you'd like it to be aspirationally related to emotional intelligence. 2, celebrate wins. Acknowledge and celebrate minor wins when it comes to emotional intelligence. So Jill at the office, and if your name is Jill, I don't mean you, obviously, but Jill at the office says that thing in a meeting that usually causes you to respond in a way that's, well, not emotionally intelligent, but this time you responded differently based on the goals that you had set for yourself. Celebrate that. Share that with someone who really supports you. This could be a partner, a spouse, a good friend. You know, like when you go out, take a moment to toast yourself. I'm not advocating that this is an adult beverage that you toast yourself with. If it is, great, all the power to you. But the main point is acknowledge and celebrate even minor wins when you are able to exhibit even a small degree of emotional intelligence in a situation where you normally wouldn't. Empathy, active listening, practice fully focusing on what someone's saying and understanding and remembering what's important to the person you're speaking with. Ask open-ended questions. Again, encourage the person to share more about their feelings or perspectives. Social skills. So one of these social skills is conflict resolution. Practice resolving conflicts in a calm and rational manner, seeking win-win situations. So what is it that I want? Because it's important to notice what you want from first position, but what does the other person want? Is there a way, or how can we, probably a more constructive question, how can we both get what we want in this situation? Another aspect of social skills is networking. Regularly engage in social interactions, and not just related to your work, but social interactions that you normally wouldn't involve yourself in. Join an improv group, join a book club, just get in environments where you're engaged with people in a diversified ways, basically, so you can start to improve your interpersonal skills. Continual learning. One way to continually learn is seek feedback. Again, ask trusted friends, family members, or colleagues for feedback on your emotional intelligence. Preferably make sure this is someone who likes you, otherwise their answer could be disheartening. 2, read and educate. Again, I know I said this, stay updated with the latest books, articles, and seminars on emotional intelligence. Last time I was talking about reading bios and stories so you can empathetically project yourself into the situation of the character. What I'm talking about right now is industry specific, research specific. Read books about emotional intelligence and apply, most important, apply what you're learning. Remember, increasing your emotional intelligence, it's a long-term commitment that requires regular practice and self-assessment, but most of all, be patient with yourself. You're not going to read a book and it's like, okay, next week I am now emotionally intelligent. But in 1 year, the results can be staggering. Question 5, can you give an example of self-regulation and how it applies in a work environment? And the reason behind this question is when I'm not able to self-regulate, I don't always respond in a way that's emotionally intelligent or empathetic. So the answer to this question is yes, I can do that. And wow, these questions, I hope you're seeing or listening to the fact that these questions are interrelated. So let's take a work environment. Self-regulation often comes into play during stressful situations or conflicts. Let's say you're in a team meeting and a colleague, Jill again, openly criticizes your work in a way that you find unfair, embarrassing, or disrespectful. Your immediate impulse might be to react defensively or confront the person because, let's face it, Jill has it coming. However, effective self-regulation could look like this. Number 1, pause and breathe. Before responding, take a deep breath and give yourself a moment to collect your thoughts. The pause is power. This physical act helps you manage and mediate the emotional response. Number 2, assess the situation. Use those few seconds to evaluate the importance and accuracy of the criticism, as well as the appropriate context for addressing it. Ask yourself, is this the right time and place to respond? Is the critique valid? Jill may have a point, which is hard to hear, but it's possible. 3, choose your words carefully. If you decide to address the issue then and there, frame your response in a way that's professional and focused on the issue, not the person. You might say, Jill, I appreciate the feedback. Can we discuss how to improve this project further? 4, decide on a long-term course of action. If the setting isn't appropriate for a detailed discussion, you might decide to take it up with Jill privately or bring it to the attention of somebody else later on that maybe could sit with you and Jill and mediate. Hopefully somebody that both you and Jill both like and trust. 5, reflect. After the situation's been resolved, take some time to think about how you handled it. First of all, was your response effective? Did it turn out the way you hoped it would? And would you do anything different next time? By applying self-regulation techniques like this, you can kind of navigate through workplace challenges in a way that maintains both your professionalism as well as your emotional well-being. So there could be occasions when you're under an enormous amount of pressure and there are multiple stressors occurring at once in a short time span. is there a tool for determining which stressor to tackle first? And I think one simple answer could be in high stress situations with multiple stressors, a prioritization tool can help you decide which issues to tackle first. So one commonly used approach is the Eisenhower matrix, and this is also known as the urgent and important matrix. This tool can break tasks into 4 quadrants. 1, urgent and important. These are crises and deadlines that need immediate action. Number 2, these are things that are important, but they're not necessarily urgent. These are long-term objectives that can contribute to your personal and professional growth, but they don't need to be tackled straight away. Number 3, this is a category of things that are urgent, but not important. These tasks might demand immediate attention, but they don't necessarily contribute to your goals long-term. And quadrant 4 is things that are neither urgent nor important. These are tasks that can be considered distractions, and they're best to be often delegated or even in some cases ignored because there's not a high level of positive consequences in addressing them, and there's not a lot of negative consequences in ignoring them. So here's some steps in how you can utilize this tool. List all of your stressors. Write down all of the tasks or the issues that are causing you stress in the moment. Number 2, categorize them. Place each stressor in one of the appropriate 4 quadrants. 3, prioritize. You could start by handling the urgent and important tasks first because they need to be dealt with first, and there's high consequences if you don't deal with them, and there's positive benefits if you do. Second, or B rather in this, you could plan for important but not urgent tasks. So these are things that you don't necessarily need to address straight away, but taking action on writing an appointment with yourself when you're going to go about handling these. Delegate. So the urgent but not important tasks. Is there anybody who can handle this right now other than you? And consider ignoring, delegating, postponing, or any of the above, these tasks. And you want to pay close attention to important but not urgent. Just want to make a point of that because these are the things that are easy to ignore. But if you ignore them, again, there are big long-term consequences that only build our stresses over time and interfere with emotional regulation. So action, number 4, start tackling tasks based on their categorization. Number 5, reflect and readjust. As you manage some of the stressors and urgency and importance of the remaining tasks, as they start to change, keep adjusting your priorities accordingly. Don't get locked into a plan of action. By systematically assessing and prioritizing your stressors, tools like the Eisenhower matrix can kind of help you manage multiple challenges more effectively, even when they come at you all at once. Okay, and the final question is question number 6. How do you hold other people in your organization or even in your social circle accountable when they're not demonstrating emotional intelligence? And I think the important part about this is how do you do that without making these people feel attacked? Helping somebody to become more self-aware without making them feel attacked is a delicate process, and it requires empathy, emotional intelligence on your part, tact, timing, and trust. And here's a possible approach on how to do it. 1, build a trusting relationship. Trust is the foundation of any constructive conversation. Make sure that you've established rapport and taken the time to build a relationship with this person before you just dive into sensitive topics. Number 2, choose the right time and place. Context is important. Preferably choose a neutral, private setting where both of you can focus on the conversation without distractions. In other words, this is better done in a coffee shop rather than in the middle of the office. 3, use I statements. Frame your observations in terms of your own perceptions and feelings and avoid sounding accusatory. For example, you might want to say, well, Jill, picking on poor Jill here, I've noticed that ... Instead of saying, Jill, you always, that might have a different response from Jill. 4, be specific. Vague feedback can be confusing, and it might be perceived as an attack. Use specific examples to illustrate your point, and that goes along with you always. So Jill, the other day in the meeting or Tuesday in the meeting, you had said this. That's an example of being really specific. Again, open-ended questions. Encourage self-exploration by asking questions like, how did you feel when that happened? Or what was your thought process there? Because that is non-judgmental, and it shows a willingness for you to understand the other person. It demonstrates empathy. 6, be non-judgmental. Approach the conversation with an open mind and withhold criticism. The goal is to provide a different perspective and reach common ground and understanding. It's not to judge, and it's, heaven forbid, not to be right. 7, focus on the behavior, not the person's character. Pointing out specific behaviors is less likely to be taken personally than making statements about someone's character. Like, you're so critical, or you're so mean, Jill. Obviously, you don't want to do something like that. And 8, offer support. And this only works when you are sincere. Make it clear that your intent is to help, not harm. Offer to work together to address any challenges. Offer to be a sounding board. If they need someone to talk to, be that person. But you have to be sincerely willing to step into that space. 9, give them space. When you've shared your observations, give the other person time to reflect. They might need space to process what you just said. And 10, follow up. A single conversation's rarely, if ever, enough for someone to become fully self-aware or fully connected with you and fully trusting in this context. Offer to revisit the topic and provide ongoing support. Because if you can approach the conversation with care, sensitivity, and a genuine desire to help, you increase the likelihood that the other person is going to be receptive to becoming more self-aware of their behaviors that interfere with emotional intelligence. Make sure that your intention is actually set on helping someone out of care rather than needing to quote unquote fix them. That is over the line. It very rarely works. So I hope this was insightful, and I hope you got a couple of tools out of this that you can utilize, because these are questions that come up quite a bit around the all-important interpersonal and cultural topic of improving emotional intelligence. Thank you, and see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit us at the selfhelpantidote.com to share your feedback, insights, and recommendations on what topics you'd like us to explore in the future.